Hello, and welcome to the NISD EdChat Podcast, your regular look into the innovative projects going on within the district and the educators who make them possible. I'm your host, Matt Freimeyer, and today we'll be talking about academic success with academic language. Academic language is defined as the language needed by students to do the work in schools. It includes, for example, discipline-specific vocabulary, grammar, and punctuation, and applications of rhetorical conventions and devices that are common for a content area. Today we'll be talking to Dr. Stephen Fleenor of Seidlitz Education, who works with middle school science teachers around Northside. Dr. Fleenor is the author of Teaching Science to ELs, which covers strategies for working with students whose linguistic and cultural backgrounds, as well as their languages, are different from your own. Thank you for being here with us today, Dr. Fleenor.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
Awesome. My first thing that we just want to get to is, Dr. Fleenor, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your work?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a consultant with a group called Seidlitz Education. And what that means is that I deliver professional development and I do instructional coaching with teachers, as well as writing books on language-rich pedagogy within the K through 12 setting.
In your book, you suggest methods to foster proficiency in reading, writing, listening, and speaking in the science classroom. Do you think these methods can be utilized across disciplines?
100%. Absolutely. These methods are really, they're about language and they're about acquiring academic language in the science context. But really what they're about learning, because there is a really intricate connection between the ability for our brains to process and to acquire academic language and for the ability of our brains to acquire and retain newly learned content. So whether you're talking about science or social studies or ELR math or CTE or electives or any kind of field, really what we're trying to get our students to be able to do is to be able to read, write, comprehend, and talk about the content material in a comprehensible and academic way. And so these strategies help students do exactly that.
We've heard from some of our teachers that the strategies you suggest are solid pedagogy. And for ELs, we have to be intentional and provide scaffolding in order for them to be successful. Let's talk a little bit about that. First off, do you understand where they're coming from insofar as providing scaffolding?
Absolutely. What's really important is that students are acquiring academic language, no matter who the student is. I like to say that all students are academic English language learners, because all students are on some end of the spectrum of better acquiring new academic vocabulary and being able to use that academic vocabulary in context. So when we're talking about these strategies, the reason why they seem so much like solid pedagogy is because they are so solid pedagogy. What we're trying to do is we're trying to help our students learn. We help our students learn by connecting them with academic language. English learners are unique within our classrooms because they are, in addition to trying to acquire academic language, they're also trying to acquire the English language and develop proficiency in that. And the reason why it is 100% non-negotiable that these strategies need to be in place within a classroom that serves English learners, which is effectively almost every classroom today. The reason why it's non-negotiable that these strategies need to be in place is because these strategies help English learners acquire English language at the same time as it helps them acquire academic language.
What kind of scaffolding do you think would be effective?
Well, so there's two different kinds of scaffolding. We like to talk about academic language in terms of making the new content or the new language input comprehensible to the students, and then making the language output structured and low stress for the students. So a scaffold that would make the language input comprehensible would be a visual or a diagram or a graphic organizer, anything that helps students infer meaning of new vocabulary from a non-linguistic source, so from a visual. A scaffold that supports students in producing that language output. Well, the classic one is a sentence stem, and sentence stems are really powerful because they structure exactly what the academic language should look and sound like for students, both in speaking as well as with writing. But when you combine those two together and you use this on a routine basis, when you're working with any academic vocabulary, you have a visual that has that academic vocabulary inside it, and then you have a sentence stem that sets students up to use that academic vocabulary. That is a scaffold that sets English learners up for success 100% of the time.
Moving on to academic language itself. How does academic language drive critical thinking and inquiry, and why do you think it's important?
Oh, great question. Yeah, absolutely. So the thing is that underlying every single thing that we're doing in our classrooms is we are trying to get our students to develop skills. Yes, of course, whatever the content area is. Yes, of course, we want them to learn the facts and the content. But far more important than that is to teach them the skills that they need in order to become lifelong learners. I like to say that this might have been different 30 years ago or even 20 years ago. But today, there are so many facts and things that students can find out just by Googling. And so what I really like to suggest is that we really shouldn't be spending so much time or energy trying to teach students something that they can just Google. Really, what's most important is asking them questions and engaging them with content in a way that develops their critical thinking and their inquiry skills. And so structuring our lessons a lot less or structuring our lessons away from kind of a delivery of information and a lot more towards getting students to think about how new information applies to the world they know, as well as what they're learning in their class, and getting them to use those critical thinking skills is really, really powerful. And it really helps students be successful in all of their classes. You know, if you ask teachers of almost any subject, any grade level, what are your students, what process standard in your TEKS do students struggle with the most? The answer you're almost always going to get is inferencing skills. And why is that? Well, it's because students need rich and abundant opportunities to be able to start to infer ideas from limited or maybe differentially presented sources of information. And that, going back to a visual, the reason why a visual is so powerful is not just because it raises the levels the playing field for students who might have linguistic struggles. What it also does is it develops students in their inferencing skills, and it makes them critically think. If you show if you give a definition of photosynthesis to a student and you say, what does photosynthesis mean? Well, they're going to tell you exactly what that definition says, and they're not going to be using very many critical thinking skills. If you give a diagram that shows as oxygen and carbon transfer and plants and sunlight and the interaction with water, and you show all these things, and then you ask a student to explain photosynthesis, a student is going to have to tap into really deep inferencing and critical thinking skills to be able to produce that. So really, when we're talking about language instruction, we're talking about developing critical thinking skills, and that is so important because it transfers to every single aspect of their academic lives. And
you might have sort of already touched on this, but why is it important for ELs to experience critical thinking and inquiry? You kind of talked about the visual part of it. It may be because they're not necessarily completely familiar with the English language that maybe the critical thinking and inquiry is a little bit is important here.
Absolutely. You know, English learners they have twice the challenge, but they also are poised to become twice the superpower in terms of brain power. And what I mean by that is they're trying to learn new content and new academic language at the same time as they're trying to become bilingual. And what that means is that when they're exposed to critical thinking challenges and they're exposed to opportunities to develop their critical thinking skills, then that allows them to grow both in their academic content as well as their English language proficiency, because learning a new content is the exact same in my opinion, as well as what research supports, as learning a new language, because essentially our contents are a new language. And so if we do provide critical thinking skills to our students, they are going to learn the academic content, and they're going to be thinking deeply about the academic content. If we provide opportunities for our English learners to develop critical thinking skills, they're going to be learning the academic content, and they're going to be learning. They're going to be acquiring the English language at the same time. So it's essentially doubly important that we provide these kinds of opportunities to our students to develop critical thinking skills when we're talking about English learners. And I should also say that when we're talking about inquiry-driven instruction is so important, essentially because inquiry really helps students develop critical thinking skills. Really, what teachers do best is not give great explanations, though teachers give great explanations. What teachers do best is they ask great questions. And you walk into almost same classroom, and you see teachers just on the fly coming up with these amazing questions that they're asking their students. And I think the reason why we as educators ask such great questions all the time is because intuitively we know that's how kids learn. They don't learn by absorbing new information. They learn by thinking about information. And so really driving a lesson through questioning, giving them some kind of foundational background knowledge. And I should say that foundational background knowledge can come from a visual or a diagram as much as it could come from a direct teach. Actually, it could come from a visual diagram a lot better than it could come from a direct teach. We give them that foundational background knowledge, and then we ask them a question that where they have to draw information from it. That is how we develop their critical thinking skills. Even better if we ask them to come up with a new question. That really drives critical thinking more than anything else.
Finally, our Northside ISD mission statement is every day, every student grows in confidence, curiosity, and capability. Do you think that there is a connection between our mission and the kind of work that you're promoting?
Yeah. Well, kudos to Northside for having such a succinct and really powerful mission statement. I love this mission statement. And what it makes me think of is the idea of the zone of proximal development, where it's the region just outside of a student's comfort zone, where they are learning new material, but it's close enough to their comfort zone so that they're able to access it. And more than anything else, language-rich strategies, focusing on academic language, focusing on content being comprehensible, and structured output opportunities of practicing using academic language is low stress. What that does is it allows students to access their zone of proximal development and grow as learners. So when we're talking about their growing in their confidence and capability, really looking at a million different classrooms, I have only ever seen that the biggest difference between a high-performing student, the highest performing student in the class, and the most struggling student in the class is almost all the time simply confidence. And if we can make every student's zone of proximal development more accessible by helping the students to connect with academic language, then we can grow their confidence and in turn their capability. Because as students access their zones of proximal development, they then grow as learners, and their zones of proximal development become bigger, and they can access even new content and new learning. And that last piece, curiosity, I just love that word, because especially at the secondary level, I do a lot of work at the secondary level, and we get a lot of frustration at the secondary level when we have kids who seem like, quote unquote, they don't want to learn, or they just don't want to be in school. It is a frustration I hear a lot. And what I have found is that when students are, no matter what their background is, no matter how high quality or how robust their education to date has been, or their experience in school to date has been, all students all people want to learn, and that is so true for students. And what they need more than anything else is they need the confidence and structure to be able to tap into that curiosity. So when we're talking about growing students' zones of proximal development and making academic language more accessible to them, what we're really talking about is creating the ideal environment in which students' natural curiosity comes out, and they naturally are empowered and as a result eager to learn new content. And honestly, that is the most, and I think basically every educator would agree with me, there is nothing more rewarding in education than seeing a student's curiosity come out. And I am in the pursuit of that. I've come to learn that really creating environments in which students can access and practice using academic language, those are the kind of environments where their curiosity comes out, and those are the most enjoyable environments to ever teach in. So I love this mission statement, and there is definitely a more than a connection between academic language and Northside's mission.
Dr. Fleenor, thank you very much for being here with us today.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure.
What do you think about the effectiveness of academic language? Be sure to follow us on Twitter at NISD EdChat or using hashtag NISD EdChat for more information. That's going to do it for this episode. Be sure to subscribe to us here on YouTube for more updates and more episodes. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next time.